Hey, so you started your worm bin, made your bed up just like the person who gave you the worms or sold you the worms told you how to do it. You added your worms, you fed your worms, and now it's time to harvest that black gold. You sure? Got a question for you. Are those castings the best that they can possibly be? Did you really do everything to get out of the time you put into it the best castings that you can possibly get? Are they the best? Are you sure? Well, let's talk about it. I'm going to show you what I do so that you spend your time and your worms spend their time getting the most nutritious black gold that you can have for your garden, your plants, your farm. Let's do this. Imagine you're a worm and you get 3 meals a day of nutrient deficient cardboard. All right. So we were talking about nutrition for our worms. This is how I do it. Now, I'm not telling you this is a how to do it. I'm telling you how I do it. I believe that the more varied the diet of the earthworms, the better castings that they're going to produce. So I shred up my lettuce, my tomatoes, my banana peels, my squash, pretty much anything that's living. This is what I consider a living food compared to shredded newspaper, which is kind of like, well, a dead food. You think about it, if all you ate all day long was McDonald's or gruel, you're you're not going to be real happy and you're not going to be very productive. However, when you feed your worms a varied diet of good things, nutritious things, they're going to be happy. So now you're feeding your worms and your microbes nutritious stuff. Let me show you how to make a bedding that can also feed your worms and the microbes the greatest. All right, let's go ahead and put this puppy together. What I've got down here, these are some old overs from a sifting of castings that I recently did. They're pretty dry. What I've got here is bark. And this is going to go on the bottom. And the reason why I put the bark in there is to add the fungi that the worms would naturally encounter in their world. And the bacteria in the castings is going to jump on that really quick to help to break it down. Yeah, the reason why I like to use bark, kind of a weird thing, but I think when the worms are casting off their cocoons, they like to have something they can rub on. I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but you know what? If I'm right, I'm doing a good job. The next thing is the biochar. Now, I love adding biochar to my worm castings. I mean, the biochar itself, if you're not familiar with it, maybe actually pretty soon I am going to do a video on biochar and its benefits for the worms and for your castings. But basically, think of them as little hotels for all that bacteria to live in. Now, some of these pieces are pretty good size, and what that does, and actually, because these contain air inside all the little pockets inside of them, again, I'm not going to go into the science of it, but trust me, Google it, it's there. I do make that biochar myself. Now we've got you've seen this before in other videos, my dried sifted cow manure. All the gunky stuff is taken out of it. It's basically just what the cows had eaten, the grasses. Outstanding for the garden. It just adds the tilth, the structure to the soil, and the worms love it. All right, speaking of water, were we speaking of water? I don't know. Let's add some water to this. Now that doesn't look real hospitable to a worm right now, but I'm going to add cardboard, and we're going to add that as another layer. The final thing, if you know me, seen any of my other videos, I love adding leaves. And these are oak leaves, maple leaves, pine leaves. And we'll spray them down too. So what we've done today is basically reenacted or simulated what the worms are going to find in the ground. They're going to find some dirt. They're going to find something to eat. And they're going to find a place where they can feel comfortable and carry out what they do. What we started off with was some old overage castings that I had sifted on the bottom, bark to add the fungi to the mixture here. The common order. Now, you know, folks, again, I go overboard. I really do. If you don't have all of this, you don't need all of this. But something I would suggest is try to make it as natural as possible. So let's look at some nutrition additives that you can add to make your best castings. So the first thing that we want to bring nutrition to our worms, to our microbiology inside of the bin, and eventually to our castings is a variety. So what we're going to do today is, since I use this bin to make this video, we're going to do a little bit of a feeding, and I'm going to show you about variety. Now, you can still see there's a little bit of, I'm going to guess that's carrot, a little bit of celery left in there. But today is their dry feeding day, and I want to show you what, when I talk about variety for the microbiology, for our worms, and for our castings, this is what I'm talking about. These are ground up leaves. If you saw in the beginning of the video on my Moby bin, all those leaves, well, I grind them up. Now, what I just put in there, if you'd have done that in just whole leaves, would have been a whole lot of leaves. My worm chow, nothing special. I use a variety of rice, wheat, dried greens, beans, whatever I can dry up and dehydrate, then grind it up. That's what I use for my worm chow. Coffee, it's got the nitrogen. The microbiology loves it. Now, I think I showed in one of the earlier videos how I kind of mold it up, let the biology get to working on it before I use it. And that's what this is. Now, because we're getting close to springtime, and I'm going to need a lot of good, nutritious castings and biochar, I've also taken to, in the last couple of feedings, adding a little bit of biochar to it so I can charge that biochar. Oh, good time to maybe hit that notification bell, subscribe. I've got a good video on how I make my biochar, what I use it for, this in my farm garden. I'm going to give them a little bit of eggshell. Now, because I use the leaves and a lot of things that I bring in from outdoors and dehydrate, I think a lot of it has dirt or grit in it already. So I don't put a whole lot of eggshells in there primarily as grit. I put it in there just to kind of help to balance off the pH. All right. Something that I grow a lot of, I'll be having videos on this as well, is comfrey. If you ever grew comfrey and you noticed when you pulled up the roots to maybe split them up and make more, or just to harvest the plant, the worms love it. And I think that's because comfrey's a bioaccumulator. It brings up the minerals and all that from deep into the ground that normal plants can't get. The worms understand that. They have a symbiotic relationship with the plants. They bring them what they want. I'll have a video on comfrey as well this summer. I've already got part of it put together from last year, but I really like this stuff. It works for a lot of good things. I make a nice salve out of it. Let's go ahead and show another important part right now. Now, since I just put a lot of dry materials on here, we all know that worms need moisture. Now, this bed is good for moisture. There's not anything wrong with that moisture right there. But what we're going to do is, because we put the dry materials on there, we're going to give it a good spray down. Now, just like worms, the microbiology in the bin, in the worm bedding, in where the worms live, they need moisture too, because that's how they get around. It's part of their mobilization. If you ever looked under a microscope at the biology, it's swimming or floating or doing some kind of goldfish thing. I don't know. But they need the moisture too. So we're going to add the moisture to it. Okay, I almost forgot one of the most important things that I was going to do. Okay, we talked about how I like to add variety. This is ryegrass that I sprouted. Now, it's still pretty young, but we're going to pop that in there. Put the plant side down. Now, one of the neat things that I do when I do my sprouts is I actually use a bean husk as a substrate for it to get started in. Well, I've actually got a video coming out soon on that too. What I do basically though is when I harvest my green beans, I let them dry and then I husk them and save the seeds for this year's crop. But it works really great. It allows the roots to really get down inside of the entire substrate material. And we all know roots and worms and microbiology works well. They also get the greens. This will be gone shortly. I don't put a whole lot in. I think I add enough of a variety as it is, but I do add this to it. It's just something else you can think about for adding to your worm bin to make the nutrition even better for them. Now, when I'm talking about highly nutritious worm castings, this is what I mean. Now, this has only been pulled out of the bin, still needs to be sifted, and I'll go through a 1/4-inch screen and then again through an 1/8-inch screen. But as you can see, the biochar, that is charged biochar. But that is nutritious, biologically active worm castings. Notice the dark color. It's got that chocolate brown look to it. No, not look to it, that's what it is. It's chocolate brown. And that's what you get from using a variety of ingredients to feed your worms, to make your bedding with, and you'll end up with that rather than something that's not quite as good. And that's the whole point of this video, folks. You're going to spend the time, your worms are going to spend the time, make the best quality bedding, give the best quality food varieties, and you're going to get great worm castings. All right, so speaking of feeding, one more thing I want to bring up on this. It's got to be consistent. Now, sure, your worms can live in that same bin, whether you put any food or not in there, for a long time. But think of it this way. To be healthy, think of it like a bodybuilder, like an athlete. They eat continuously. Now, I know, you probably know, these worms can be ravenous. They will eat whatever you put in there. Now, don't overfeed. No, that's one of the worst things you can do. Don't overfeed. But feed consistently. Get on a schedule. Your worms will be better for it. It'll be easier on you because you'll know, okay, I read it down in my calendar. Okay, I fed a wet feeding this day. I fed a dry feeding this day. I added azomite, I added biochar, I added whatever I put in. I put it on a schedule. It makes it really easy for me to look at it and know what I need to do to get the best castings that I can get. Folks, I want to thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of it. If you're interested in this kind of content, check out my channel. Give me a like, give me a subscribe, whatever. Come on back, take a look. I'm going to have all kinds of different videos, like I mentioned throughout this video, that hopefully it can help you with your worm journey, help you get the best worms that you can possibly get. Come here, Freya, my cat. And get the best castings you can get to supply your plants with everything that they need. Get away from the chemical fertilizers. Use the worm castings. It really works great. We'll talk to you later. Thanks again.